Picture a group of hunters moving through the African savanna roughly 70,000 years ago. The rest of the camp is asleep. One person isn't. He's been awake for hours, his attention skipping between the sound of wind through the grass, a shadow that moved at the tree line, the ember at the edge of the fire that went dark too fast. Nobody asked him to watch. Nobody told him to notice. His brain simply would not let him stop. By morning, he spotted fresh lion tracks near the water source before anyone else was up. He's already rerouted the group before the danger became obvious. Now picture the modern version of that same brain. He's sitting in a classroom at age 9, and a teacher is telling his parents he cannot focus, that he needs to slow down, that he's falling behind. Same wiring, different world, and that gap between what his brain was built for and where it's been placed is the story almost nobody is telling. If you're enjoying this so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. In 2010, evolutionary biologist Tom Hartman published an updated version of a theory he'd been building for years. He called it the hunter-farmer hypothesis. The short version is this: the traits we now diagnose as AD, impulsivity, hyperfocus, novelty-seeking, the inability to sustain attention on low-stimulation tasks, were not errors in the ancient brain. They were the job description. Hartman was careful. He was not claiming AD is a superpower that modern medicine should leave untreated. He was pointing at something more unsettling than that. The brain pattern we pathologize today was selected for. It survived because it worked, and the environments in which it worked have almost entirely disappeared. ADHD affects roughly 5 to 10% of the global population. That number has held across cultures, across continents, across societies with wildly different diets, sleep patterns, and levels of technology. Evolutionary biologists notice this. If ADHD were simply a dysfunction, a breakdown in wiring that offered no adaptive benefit, natural selection should have pushed it toward extinction over hundreds of thousands of years. It didn't. It held steady, which means the question isn't why so many people have AD. The question is why a brain built for ancient conditions keeps getting born into a world it was never designed for. The neuroscience here is specific. In 2019, researchers at the University of Southampton found that adults with AD consistently outperformed neurotypical adults on tasks requiring rapid environmental scanning, the ability to detect change, movement, or threat across a wide visual field. They were faster, they were more accurate. Their brains weren't distracted. They were doing exactly what distracted brains were built to do: monitor everything at once. The dopamine system tells most of this story. The ADHD brain is wired toward a lower baseline of dopamine activity, which means it is constantly seeking stimulation to reach a functional threshold. In a hunter-gatherer context, this is precisely the right calibration. A brain that gets bored fast in low stimulation conditions is a brain that keeps moving, keeps scanning, keeps looking for the next thing. Sitting still wasn't the goal. Staying alert was. Anthropologist Peter Gray at Boston College spent years documenting the daily structure of modern hunter-gatherer groups and comparing them to ancestral studies. His findings are hard to argue with. The average workday in a foraging society involved short, intense bursts of activity, tracking, pursuing, gathering, followed by extended social time, rest, and play. There were no 8-hour blocks of sustained focus at a fixed station. There were no desks. The modern school day, or the modern office day, was not something these brains evolved to tolerate. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. In 2008, a genetics researcher named Dan Eisenberg at Northwestern University studied the Ariaal people of northern Kenya. The Ariaal are one of the few remaining populations that still practice a traditional semi-nomadic lifestyle alongside settled communities. This gave Eisenberg a rare natural comparison. Some Ariaal families had moved into agricultural villages, others were still nomadic, and within both groups, he tested for a gene variant called DRD4-7R, a dopamine receptor variant found at much higher rates in people with ADHD than in the general population. What he found changed the conversation. Among the nomadic Ariaal, men who carried the DRD4-7R variant were significantly better nourished than those without it, more successful, higher status. But among the settled farming Ariaal, the same variant was associated with lower nutrition and lower status. The exact same gene, the exact same variant, producing opposite outcomes depending entirely on the environment the person was living in. Eisenberg was careful not to overstate it, but the implications sat there plainly in the data. The ADH gene variant wasn't broken in the nomadic group. It was functioning as designed. The farming environment had changed the outcome, not the wiring. Go back further than the Ariaal. Go back to the Paleolithic, to the moment around 12,000 years ago when the first agricultural societies began to form in the Fertile Crescent. This is the moment behavioral researchers call the Great Mismatch. For the first time in human history, survival required something the restless brain was not built for: staying in one place, doing repetitive tasks at steady intervals, managing long-term planning over months and seasons, tolerating boredom for deferred reward. The skills that had kept the restless, novelty-seeking, hyper-aware brain alive for hundreds of thousands of years became liabilities almost overnight in evolutionary terms. This is not a metaphor. Harvard psychiatrist Edward Hallowell, who has spent 30 years treating ADHD and who has it himself, has written about this structural mismatch at length. He describes the odd brain as a Ferrari engine with bicycle brakes. The power is real. The problem is the road. What the ancient evidence shows is that for most of human history, there was no road. There was open ground, shifting conditions, real stakes, and immediate feedback. The ad brain was not a liability in that world. The constant scanning was useful. The impulsivity that drives modern people to quit jobs and change plans was the same trait that made a hunter break from the group to follow an unexpected trail and come back with food. The hyperfocus that makes a child unable to hear their name called across a room is the same mechanism that allowed a tracker to hold a single set of footprints in mind across miles of savanna and not lose the thread. None of this erases the real difficulties. The odd brain in a classroom, in a bureaucratic workplace, in a society that runs on paperwork and patience, can be genuinely painful to carry. Hallowell is clear on this. The diagnosis matters, the support matters, but understanding where the wiring came from changes what the wiring means. It means the restless kid in the back of the room isn't broken. His brain is doing something ancient and honest. It's watching the tree line for things that might move. It's monitoring a world that no longer demands that kind of watching, in a body that doesn't know that yet. There's something worth sitting with in that. The traits most likely to get a child referred to a specialist: can't sit still, can't focus, always on to the next thing, always needing more stimulation than the room provides. Those are the same traits that, 50,000 years ago, made someone the most valuable person in the group. The one you wanted awake when everyone else was sleeping. The one whose brain never fully let the fire go out. The world changed. The brain didn't. And maybe that's not a failure of the brain. There's one more piece of this that almost never gets discussed. The ADHD brain doesn't just scan the environment differently. It processes social information differently too. In 2021, researchers at King's College London found that people with ADHD traits showed a stronger and faster response to emotional cues in other people's faces. Micro-expressions, subtle shifts in posture, the kind of signals most people miss entirely. In a group that depended on reading group dynamics for survival, that sensitivity wasn't noise, it was intelligence. Ancient hunter-gatherer bands were small, typically between 20 and 50 people. Everyone's survival depended on everyone else. Knowing who was angry, who was lying, who was about to make a bad decision, that read on the room was as critical as tracking an animal. The person whose brain couldn't stop taking in information was also the person most likely to catch something the others didn't. The social scanner and the environmental scanner were running on the same hardware. Psychiatrist Ned Hallowell, separate from his clinical work, has spent years collecting accounts from adults with ADHD who describe something specific: that their worst moments come not from chaos, but from stillness. From rooms where nothing is happening, where no input is arriving, where the brain is expected to generate its own motivation from nothing. That specific pain is not a character flaw. It is a calibration error between a nervous system tuned to a dynamic world and a life that keeps asking it to perform in a static one. The ancient brain didn't need to manufacture urgency. Urgency was everywhere. Every day brought something real to respond to. The tragedy isn't that the odd brain is too much. It's that the world it was built for is mostly gone. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.